Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Learning Torah Lishma. Today, I want to talk about a deep topic. We're going to say the topic, and it's going to take a lot for us to build up to it. Not because it's something hard to understand, but the system today would fight against you a lot from understanding this truth. I'm not here to, judge, I'm just saying that's what it would do. Of course, it's wrong, but, I'm not here to, my point is not to judge. My point is to give you the abilities and the wisdom of the truth. That's it. The GRAH Mishlei, he says something there shocking to people today. People that are really smart, not so shocking. But to the average person, shocking. He says that Torah could be a Sam HaChaim, right? We call it Barasi Yetzirah, Barasi Torah Tavlin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzirah, the evil angel. In Judaism, the evil angel does the will of God. It's not its own entity like in other religions. And God says, I created the evil angel, and its job is to test mankind. It doesn't test animals. It doesn't test a giraffe. It doesn't test an eagle or a fish or a whale. What's its job? To test mankind. That's it. Now, how do you win against an angel? Even though the angels, right? There's like what's called the Satan, the Satan. Remember, the Satan in Judaism is not what people think it is. Some type of its own entity. No, it's completely controlled by God and does the will of God. Now, and its job is to test mankind. That's its job. And once Tikkun Olam happens, once the Mashiach, the Messiah comes, there will be no more purpose for the Yetzirah, because tests like that won't be anymore, and therefore the Satan will cease to exist at that time. An angel exists as long as it has a purpose. If it has no purpose, it simply ceases to exist. And every other angel could be reassigned to different tasks. The one angel that cannot be reassigned to a different task is the angel that's called the Satan. In English, the Satan. That angel cannot be assigned to do something else. And the reason is obvious, because the action, what it's doing, its action is to harm people. So you can't now, you can't now say, okay, now start helping people. People be terrified, or why are you sending me this? So you understand? So it has its purpose. It has a ticking time. It has X amount of time on the clock. Afterwards, it's no longer. That's it. We have a different shit that we went into a bit more detail, just keeping it simple. Now, this idea of a person and his free will. How does he overcome an angel? If an angel is trying to make him sin, how does he ever overcome it? There are a few answers. One of them is Hashem. God says, I'm always helping you. God did not come to create this world and then leave it. He's constantly here helping us, because without God's help, how could we overcome an angel? There's always a certain level of siyata shmaya, help from God. There's always a certain level. Now, a person could do certain sins and he could lose some of that, and in certain cases, he could lose all of it, which puts him in a very precarious, dangerous situation. But we're talking about the regular scenario. A person has siyata d'shmaya. Now, at the same time, the Satan is not allowed to use full force. He is limited according to each person, but even then, it's an angel trying to trick you. You understand? That's his job. So, as smart as you are as a human being, there's an angel trying to trick you, and therefore, you need God's assistance. Now, if one loses it because of certain types of sin, or a certain type of way of doing sin, you could lose it in this area, in that area. You understand? Sometimes you can lose it in all areas. Then a person, he has to fight against with all his being to such an extent. He has to become obsessive to fight against it and show God that he's sorry, and God's help will come back. We're not going to get into those things, according to Judaism, that a person could do that he could be in that scenario, because that is a more of a rare scenario. So we're just going to keep to the common, overwhelming common scenario. Now, Hashem says, God tells us, that besides me helping you, Barasi Yetzara, Barasi Torah Tavlin, I created the evil inclination, who is the Satan, the angel that his job is to test mankind. But you know what the antidote, you know what the Tavlin, you know what the spice is, to spice up, the person's goodness, God's helping him to spice that up. You know what it is? You know what the spice is? To 100x your abilities? Torah. Barasi Yetzar, Barasi Torah Tavla. I created the Torah. What the Christians call the Old Testament, what Judaism call the Testament, what Christianity, what Muslims call Testament also. I don't believe they call it the Old. They just have the Testament and the Quran. That's what I believe. Reading and learning and going in depth into the Tanakh, that 100x's, 1000x's your powers. Your spirituality jumps and leaps to heights you never could imagine. You become a different human being. Your ability to help people is tremendous. Your ability to succeed is unmatched. This is what Chazal tell us. Barasi Yetzar, Barasi Torah Tavla. The power of the Torah. Amazing. Now this, what Chazal tell us, creates a big question on what the GRAH says. And of course, the GRAH knew what he was talking about, so it's something that we're missing. We don't understand, and that's what we're going to try to delve into today. But the GRAH says that the Torah can either be a Samachaim or a Samamaves. It could either be a potion of life or a potion of death. And the question is, that seems to contradict the statement. That seems to be going against the statement of our sages, Barasi Yetzar, Barasi Torah Tavlin. I created the evil inclination, and I created the Torah as a spice to bring out the power inside of you to extents that you could never imagine. So before we answer this question, I think we need to build up to it a bit. To properly understand it, in Jewish law, there's something called, and it's in the 10 Commandments, it's called Kabed es avicha v'esimecha. Thou shalt honor his father and mother. There's another commandment, to fear them. 2 commandments, to give them honor. And then there's another verse that says you need to fear them. It's not enough that you honor them, you need to fear them as well. Now, we're not going to get into all the explanations of this, We're just touching upon this law. And it gives an example of 2 people doing similar actions. One is honoring the parents, because there's 2 things. It gives an example for honor and fear. Right? So fear would, let's say, be if your parent has a specific chair that's their chair, don't sit in that chair. Don't call them by the first name without first saying, my revered father, my revered mother. Meaning, you could just say mother or father, but to say their name, their actual name, let's say their name is Yankee or Joe or Esther or Martha, you understand? You're not allowed to say that name. That's called fear. Now, if you need to say their name, then you say my revered Miriam, my revered Martha, my revered Yaakov, my revered Jacob, you understand? Or Joe, you say my revered one. And in that way, when you're saying their name, you're giving honor to them. And in that way, it's okay. You're showing. So that's called that's called you're giving them reverence. Now, for honor, the example is that you have 2 families. One family is rich, one family is poor. And in the poor family, you'll see why it's not both rich, both poor. You'll understand the reasoning shortly. In the poor family, the son or the daughter, their mother or father lives by them. Hopefully both are alive, and let's say they're living by them. And they make a meager, amount of money. They're relatively, they're less than well-to-do. They're more on the poor spectrum. And from the little food that they get, they love their parents so much. They honor them so much. They split that food with them. And they bring it to their parent with a smile, with happiness, thanking their parents that they gave them life. And all that they did them, changing the diapers, being up nights when they cried, and all different things. And then you have the rich family. They make a lot of money. And then, how could they say no to their parents to live by them? They have a big house. It wouldn't look proper in the community to say no. So they live by them. The parents are a bit disabled. You understand? You have to bring them food. You have to clean them. There's different things you need to do. You know, in the olden days, wasn't all this like, you know, you could get someone to take care of your parents, you know. It was a lot of it you had to do yourself, which the reward is great, right? It says you're going to get a arichas yamim, you get a long life, a long, fulfilling life. And these, but, you know, the rich people, they didn't realize that. They're so successful. You know, they don't realize the blessing of the parents. They don't realize it in this world, and certainly they don't realize it in the next world. The fact that they're successful here blinds them. Again, not all scenarios, but we're talking about a scenario that it does. And we could see how it does, you understand? It blinds, because they're so successful, they think that they don't need the blessing of God. And once they moved God out of the picture, then they're not really thinking of the next world about, you know, too much either. And every time, so, you know, every time, you know, so the food that they give to their parents, it's juicy, it's a variety, echt, you know? That's Yiddish, you know, like the best of the best, la creme de la creme, you know? The real good stuff they give them. But they have a frown on their face. You just feel, you know, the aura around them just is that they're unhappy to do this. They would rather spend time doing other things. And this is a nuisance for them. So the poor family is giving, you know, something it's hard to even call it food. You know, it's a bit of a miracle that they're even surviving. It's some, you know, meager thing mushed together, hardly edible. It somehow has just enough nutrition to keep them alive, but they give it with a smile. The sages tell us that is greater than the rich person who's giving with such broadness, so much stuff is there, but with a sour face, angry that he has to do it, he or she, that they have to do it. So you see, two people could do an act. One, his act is, compared to the rich person, is very little. But how he approaches it, that's what makes the difference. When the parents of the pauper, when they receive the food, they feel like human beings. They're so happy with their life and with their kids and with their family. And unfortunately, the rich family, again, it doesn't have to be this, but it is a challenge that rich people face more. But, you know, they could excel in it. But in this scenario, they didn't. And it's just the parents, when they eat the food, they feel like they're eating poison. They feel like they're snakes and scorpions, like they're less than a human being. Each bite that they take, another day of their life is shortened. They're so embarrassed and so broken about the situation. You see that people could do actions, but if the approach, how they do it, could take a meager action and raise it to the highest heights. And you could have an action that's filled with so many delicacies, but if the approach, how you did it, was so terrible, it brings a person into hell, God forbid. into Gehenna. We touched upon the idea of novel Bereshus HaTorah, person keeping the commandments, but he's considered a novel, a disgusting human being. Spiritually, physically, he can look very, he has the gel, everything is spiffy, the Rolex, everything looks fine. And nice clothing, everything looks, nice glasses, the haircut's done perfect, everything is pish-posh, But when he does the mitzvahs Hashem, when he fulfills the commandments of God, or the will of God, he is angry about it. He wishes he didn't have to. And he's not even working. Sometimes a person has a big challenge, and God understands that sometimes it takes time to work on yourself to get connected to God in this area. But he doesn't even care. He doesn't even want to be connected. It's just a force. He never wants to be connected to God. It's not on his itinerary. He's just, in his mind, it's just a force, and that's it. It's nothing more to him. A person, that type of service of God, not only doesn't it bring him into heaven, but it brings him into hell. How dare you serve God that way? You understand? There's one thing that a person is having big difficulties in an area, but he's trying to work on himself. That's one thing. But here, when he really hates God, he's not trying to work on himself. This is a terrible thing. And then he can have someone, he's very limited in his abilities, But each act that he can do, he does it with such joy, with such glee. Is there any way to value that commandment that he kept, that way of life that God wanted him to do, even if it wasn't a commandment, the advice of God, he did it? Is there any way that you could put a value on that? It's precious beyond anything. It's like the royal jewels, right? That no one wants to insure them. Why? Because it's the value. There is no erech to it. It's priceless. That simple act of a simple Jew, he didn't even do something that was a commandment. He just did the will of God. And he could just be a simple Jew. That is priceless. Agav, on the side note, this is one of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, realizing the value of a mitzvah. When you do it lishma, you do it with love to God. Not out of force, not out of hate, not out of resentment. Not because you have to do it, but because you love God. That's the Shema. That's what the Baal Shem Tov teaches. It's worth it to work a whole day to do one mitzvah like that. Of course, any other commandments that have to be done, you have to do them. But in the realm of heta, of permissity, when things, of permitted things, it's worth it to do one of those types of mitzvahs or wills of God than to do 1,000 or 1,000,000 others. Because when you do a mitzvah, when you do a commandment of God, when you do the will of God with love and devotion, that becomes priceless. That's real. And with this, we can understand what the GRAH is talking about. And right before we go to that, let's just bring down the Rambam, because I think it'll also help us understand it. The Rambam says that a Rebbe, a spiritual teacher, has a right not to teach his student if he sees that he has severe character flaws. And he has a right to say, we first have to work on that, on the severe character flaw. Why does he say that? If you learn Torah, it's going to go away, right? Why does he say that a spiritual teacher has the right to say we have to first work on that, that severe flaw that you have, that incorrection in your character trait? We have to first work on that. There's some things, certain simple things, regular things people have, not severe, but sometimes someone has something really severe. You understand? Before we start learning, in general, the book of God, we got to focus on that thing. We got to fix that thing. Why? If you learn the book of God, it automatically will get fixed. The answer that the Rambam is telling us is there could be many scenarios that it won't get fixed. And the fact that you're learning Torah and you're not focusing on that severe midah, attribute in yourself that needs to be flipped. You have to learn how to flip it to the good side, to the tzad tov. If you don't flip it, now when you learn Torah, when you learn the Bible, the energy that the Bible's giving you, it energizes that severe lack of character, that severe bad attribute in yourself. It energizes it. And the only way to fix it is to focus on it first. And that's how you could have a scenario, which the GRAH is talking about. Barasi Yetzahara, what the GRAH talks about, that the Torah could be a samachayim, or God forbid a samamaves. When you have grass, if there's weeds in the ground, and you pour water, the weeds will grow. First, you got to kill the weeds, and then you put the water. The Torah is considered it's daimah tamayim. It's compared to water, and water, it has this ability that it can go into the deepest crevices and make you a new human being. But if you don't get rid of the weeds, its ability to bring you to new heights is unbelievable. The water also teaches us humility, that who really connects to the Torah, you could physically know it, but who spiritually connects to it? Someone who is humble. That's the idea of it flowing down, that the Torah, water goes to the lowest point, to someone that's humble. Now, getting back to what we're saying, there's endless lessons to be learned, Getting back to what we're saying. The Samachayim, Samamaves, when you water the fields, if there are weeds, it makes the weeds grow. And you got to get rid of those weeds. You got to kill them first. You have to take the power of the Torah and laser focus it on those weeds. Because if you don't laser focus it, it's just spread out, then it won't really affect it. And now the energy coming out of it will actually be used. The energy coming out of the Torah will actually be used for bad. But if you laser focus on it, then you won't be able to use the energy for bad, because the laser focus is focusing specifically on that. That's the understanding of the GRAH. With this new understanding, a new, next level. See the wisdom of the GRAH, of our holy sages. How sometimes we don't understand something. Instead of us just thinking that the other person got it wrong, especially when it's holy people, that are next level, who are we compared to them? We have to humble ourselves and say, let me take some time to understand what they're saying. Maybe there's something I'm missing. And with this newfound wisdom, it changes a person forever. And it's next level. Now let's take this to a whole new level. Very, very powerful. We're taking it next. For people that are in truth looking for Hashem, looking for God, they'll want to hear this. You could have a holy Shomer Torah mitzvahs, a Kaddish V'tar Shomer Torah mitzvahs. You could have someone, he's doing the mitzvahs Hashem. He's surrounding himself with God. And he's becoming holier by the moment. He's changing into a new, each day he's a new human being. And then you could have someone, you could have a second person that's also keeping all the commandments. But the more he keeps the commandments, the more he loses his connection to his soul, his emotion, his feelings, his common sense, all these things. How could that be? How could that be? Let's take it step by step. I think you might have to use a few stories to bring down. This is such a high Torah, it's such a high level teaching. We might have to say a few stories to bring it down. There's a story with one of the sages. Trying to think which ones, many stories. There's a story with one of the sages. I believe it's one of the Litvisha sages. The sages of old, not too long ago, they were such giants. There was a certain orphan couple. There was a widow who had kids. And was an older widow with kids. And in those days, there was water carriers. How did you get fresh water? A person would come with bucket and go to each house. He would take the bucket, bring it back with water. But he did this early in the day, and in those regions, it's very cold. And when people got up later, it would, let's say, be frozen or half frozen, and you would need time for it to melt in order that you should be able to drink it. And this great sage, in his younger years, for this orphan house, he would go, and when it came close to the time when people woke up, he would take the pail, drop the ice, and fill it up with water and bring it back, so that the widow would come out and she would just have water to drink and be able to give her kids. It would just make everything so much easier. There's another story with the sage. But there was a poor family in the community. And in those days, there was no heaters. If you wanted heat in your house, you had to get a stack of firewood. And before the winter came, because without it, it's very hard to. You had to do it during the summer to get a stack of firewood. So the rich people could buy it all at once. Other people would have to take out a loan and pay interest and get it over time. But there was this very poor family in town, and they didn't have money to buy firewood, to even take on the loan. They couldn't do it. And they came to the Rav of the town, and they told the Rav their predicament. And the Rav was broken. He was shattered. And he went. Now the problem is that the Gvir of the town, the rich man of the town, was someone that was a miser. He was very stingy. It was very hard to get money out of him. And the Rav, in the middle of the night, in the freezing cold, the snow and everything, he goes to the rich person's house, and he tells the rich person that he needs money for. So he's going there to tell him that he needs money for this. Now, the rich man, he might not give money, but he's not going to ignore the rabbi of the town. You understand? He's a miser, but he's not an animal. You understand? He's a human being. You understand? In his mind, he's saying, well, I'll give honor to the rabbi, but I'm not going to give any money. So the rabbi of the town comes, and he says to the rich man, I have something I want to ask you. So the miser is like, okay, go ahead. He says, but before that, I have one request. Come out. I need to talk to you a bit in private. Come, take a step outside with me, and I'm going to ask you. Okay. He's going to give honor to the rabbi. He's not going to say no. He steps outside, freezing cold, and the rabbi tells him about this family that doesn't have wood, and it's a freezing winter, and they could die. You understand? It's horrible. It's terrible. And the miser, to everybody's surprise, when hearing the story later, the miser says yes. So the miser steps back in the house. He brings out a bag of coins, and he says, here, they'll have it b'shefa. They'll have even more than they need. But the Meiser said, I have one question for you, Rabbi. Why did you tell me to come outside? You could have came inside and told it to me. So the rabbi told him, I asked you to come outside because in those few minutes you would feel what they would be feeling, and that would open your heart. And the Meiser said, you know what, Rabbi, you're right. If I didn't go outside, I never would have given the money. We see the great care of the rabbi and his ability to understand that to get real kindness out of someone, he needs to be able to experience outside of himself, to experience someone else's situation. And the only way to get him to experience it would be for him to come out. If there's any chance he would give, that's the chance. And thank God, we bless God that he succeeded in that. And his family had more than enough wood for that winter. Let's see another story. There's something called, in Jewish law, there are two ways that, right? You have a couple that got married. You have a man, a woman, they get married. Now, the way to break a marriage, it should never, there are two ways that marriage could be broken. Well, not broke. One's breaking the marriage, the other one, it gets disconnected on this world, you understand? But spiritually, they're still connected. So there's one way that you get disconnected physically and spiritually, and then there's another way that just because one died, so physically you're disconnected, but spiritually you're still connected. Now, a divorce document. Now, Jews have their own document of getting married. That's called a ksuba. And then there's their own document of divorce. Now, in reality, one should never get divorced. And God says that if one gets divorced, it's the mizbeach, I'm trying to think of the English word, the mizbeach, the altar cries tears. The altar in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Holy Temple, cries tears. It's considered a horrifying event, a horrifying thing to do, even if it's necessary. Even if, let's say, the husband or the wife is literally doing terrible, terrible things. You understand? Even so, it's considered just, the heavens shake when a divorce happens. But it can be done. Now, the second type of getting disconnected physically but not spiritually from a person's spouse is when they die. Most spouses, either the man or the female dies first, and then since they're not alive, spiritually they're still connected, but physically they're not. Now they can marry another wife. Okay. So that's, now, there was a time that you were allowed to have more than one wife, but we're talking about after that time when you weren't allowed to have more than one wife, like today. Okay. I'm not going to get into all that. It's the Cherem D'Rabbeinu Gershom, like around 500 years ago, you understand? I'm not going to get into the whole thing. Okay. Now, what happens, now we're starting to get technical, this is called a Gemara cup, Talmudic, mind. What happens if a woman's husband is in the army and the soldier is lost in battle? We don't know, was he captured by the enemy or was he killed by the enemy? We don't know what happened. Now, what happens to the wife? You understand? What happens to the wife? Is she allowed to remarry or not? I'm also curious how Christians and Muslims deal with this question, because this is a big question. What about what about America? How does it deal with that question? Right? Is she allowed to get remarried according to the law if we don't know if the husband's alive or dead? What happens? So in Jewish law, this is called an aguna. It's something that breaks the heart, this scenario. But the woman gets stuck in limbo. She doesn't know if she is married still, and because she doesn't know if she's still married, because maybe the husband's alive, maybe he's dead, she can't marry someone else. Now, some women look at this and they're like, I marry one man, and if he dies, I don't marry again. A lot of women have that. Women can have that type of look. Some men have that type of look. Look at life. You understand? But there's still a lot that, if the husband died, they would want to get remarried again. But now they don't know if he's alive or dead. So now she can't remarry. And it forces her to get a private investigator. She has to try to find people that either saw him alive or dead. You understand? And in the olden days, sometimes you would never find that out. And it could be a very sad predicament. Not every scenario, is roses. Sometimes there could be a unlikely, but nonetheless something that could happen that's a pretty bad scenario. So there was a woman that was an aguna, and now what happened was that what she would do, so she, I think it was after World War I, and she didn't know if her husband was alive or dead, but she wanted so much to be with the man that, she found this, handsome man, successful, strong man, and she wanted to spend, and she was in love with him, and she wanted to spend her life with him, and she had this, and she wanted to be married to him. She didn't want to do it outside of marriage, but a rabbi is not allowed to marry her, is not allowed to do this marriage, and even if he does it, it doesn't work. You understand? But she wanted to just have that paperwork. You understand? because to her, she didn't care if it works or not. In her mind, it's the same, In her mind, it did work, you understand? But, so none of the rabbis could do it. So what she would do is she would go from town to town, and she would fabricate a story. And since there's so many laws of aguna, the rabbis, it's not easy to fabricate a story that, that would prove that you're not an aguna. So she started off, by the first town, and the rabbi said, okay, for these scenarios, you're all good, but for this scenario, you're still an aguna. And she would go from town to town like that. We only know about this because she came to one of the towns that there was a big rabbi there. And she was already, she had a good fabrication story. But this rabbi, he was one of the great rabbis, he caught it. And the woman, he said, I'm broken. He was literally crying, and about the scenario of this woman being a guna. He was crying, and he told the Lord, I'm so sorry. I want to do it, but I can't. I'm not allowed. And even if I did it, it wouldn't work. And God says, I can't even do the action, even if it doesn't work. You're not allowed to do it. But I'm broken. And the woman started to cry. He was crying. But he didn't know what to do, because maybe the man is still alive, right? Prisoner of wars, right? They put them, right? If they catch someone, they'll put them to work, a free slave. And he was completely broken and crying. But you saw, even though the rabbi, he did the law, he kept the law, and in this case, there was no way out. But he didn't say, well, this is the law, and then just ignore his heart, his soul, that's breaking because of it. He didn't go against God, but what he could do is let his soul flow. And that flow of the soul was just feeling what the woman was feeling what this man was feeling, and feeling broken for them. He couldn't do more than that. He could, meaning, this is a lot to do, to cry for someone else. That is a big thing. He couldn't give them what they wanted, but he could feel their pain. And he could be broken with them over it. This is the difference between a holy person, a holy Shomer Torah mitzvahs, someone who keeps the commandments in a holy way, and someone, the more he keeps the commandments, the more he loses connection to his soul. Someone who keeps the commandments in a holy way, when it comes to the scenario, even in the worst, this is like the worst case scenario, when you can't solve their problem, but you can be empathetic to them. You can put yourself in their shoes and feel their pain. That's a holy person that keeps the commandments. An unholy person, a person that the commandments disconnect him from his soul, is someone that says, well, the commandment says you can't, and he doesn't, and it's so clear to him that it's a no, and that's all that, he doesn't think that connecting to his soul and feeling their pain is of importance. So the more laws that he knows, the more he's becoming someone that's disconnected from his soul. And that's why it's so important that if someone has, this is a big issue that someone should have. That's where the Rambam says, you first got to fix that issue. He thinks that there's something that you don't need to feel the pain of the other person if you couldn't help them. You think you don't have to feel it. No, you have to feel it even more than them. At least equal. You have to empathize with them. You have to be broken over their predicament, over what's happening to them. Even though you, in this specific scenario, you really can't physically solve the problem. That's the difference between someone that is really moral. He doesn't go against God, but at the same time, he completely connects to the other person. But someone, when he studies and he loses his common sense, he loses his care for other people, then that's what we call novel Bershus HaTorah. That's what we call someone who, the more he learns, the more, so to speak, he becomes holy. He's doing more commandments. He's being more stringent. He's a brisker. But his empathy is gone. He's a human being without a soul. Every time, before breaking through to the next level in Shmiras HaMitzvahs, you gotta first break through the next level of being empathetic and feeling for someone. You have to be very careful. We can sometimes go on one path and forget about a different path. We have to be very careful of balance. And Hagufa, in and of itself, the mitzvahs Hashem. Don't just learn about Shabbos and Kashrus and what's an Apikairis. You gotta equally learn about the mitzvahs that teach you about V'hafta l'reacha kamaycha. You have to equally learn about the mitzvahs. You have to be balanced. Equally learn about the mitzvahs that connect you to your soul. You can't just focus on Kachim. You can't just focus on Ezekim. Gotta focus just as well on Musar. Character trait building. Sometimes a person, he gets so entangled over here, he loses his connection to here. To here. He loses his connection. This idea of balance is like a lost art today. Everybody's extremist. It's brisk. It's this, it's that. The appreciation of becoming a balanced human being is something that's lost today. People don't even know what it is. But how precious is it? Is there anything more worth it than that? You could be learning 60, 70, 80 years in Kailo. But if you didn't become a balanced human being, you didn't learn to become a balanced human being, you're nothing compared to someone who's a balanced human being. You're nothing compared to them. It's a Sam Hamaves. You must be true to yourself and understand who you are and create balance. Spiritual balance, physical balance, life balance, emotional balance. Every area of life you have to take seriously. You know, Rav Moshe Meir Weiss, when he was, when they were refurbishing the shul, doing a makeover. So the gabbai there, the person who, is in charge of everything, he asked the rabbi, because the rabbi's on top of him, so he asked the rabbi, what do you want to be involved with? So Moshe Meir Weiss, what do you think he said? Everything. Right? I want to be involved in everything. And he's talking about how he learned about the lights and different types of bulbs, the brightness, it makes people happier, it makes people more energetic and want to learn. He like every aspect he was involved with. That's what you need to do with your life. Stop thinking that that this aspect is unimportant. Whether it's learning, whether it's working on your midas, getting married, stop being picky. Looking for good character trait, people that are loyal. And not just the person that's in all the newspapers. Or that will give you the greatest honor. Rather, the person that's best for you. There's a lot of people that went after honor. I could tell you a lot of people that I know, I've seen it, that they're coming from a Rebbish background. And I'm gonna marry a commoner, a regular chassid. Only another Rebbe's daughter, another Rebbe's son is worthy for my daughter. I'm a Rebbe. My daughter is the daughter of a Rebbe. No regular chassid, no commoner can get my daughter. I'm royalty. He goes and gets this other Rebbe. Now both these Rebbes, they're nothing special. I mean, they're both special, but they're nothing big. They're not like these big Rebbes, you understand? But they're Rebbe. So in their eyes, a Rebbe cannot marry someone, their children can't marry someone that's not from a Rebbish background. Preferably someone that is a Rebbe presently. B'diavad, someone that has yichus to a Rebbe. That has a lineage going back to a Rebbe. That's like the worst case scenario. But a commoner? Never. So he goes and in his shul, the people that he has this very nice boy. He's a regular chassid, whichever chassidus it was. He's a regular chassid, very nice boy. If his daughter would have married her, he would have had so much nachas, such joy. You understand? Everything would have been perfect. Instead, he went for this Rebbe's son. And the Rebbes, sometimes I hear Rebbes, I can hear a Rebbe say, if a Rebbe, let's put it this way, if a Rebbe had to deal with the slack that Litvisha, Gedalim have to deal with, they wouldn't be a Rebbe. You understand? By them, it's like, you have to honor me. I am above you. I mean, this is not the Derech HaBaal Shem. I'm just saying what is today, in general. And they're so sure that they're above you. And not just them, but their kids. Like, and he went for this Rebbe's son. Both of them are little Rebbes, you understand? I don't even know if they have a building. Maybe one of them now does, I don't know. But they're considered Rebbes, whatever. They come from a Rebbish family. They try to make minyanim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. and different events and this and the mashpiyim, and they imagine that anybody that has anything to do with them is their chassid. It's a bit of imagination. Respectfully we're saying this, but that's, the reality. And now a Rebbe if you disrespect him, you're just cut out. Meaning, he doesn't allow it. Like by Litvish tzaddikim, they take so much slack. It's shocking. And they go on. And they'll still be friends with that person. They'll get over. They don't get stuck. But a Rebbe, it's, one false move, and that's it. You'll never be the same afterwards. They'll never look at you the same. You'll never be the same afterwards in that community. And that forces people to treat them in a way. Now, of course, there are ones that are very good. I'm just saying there's also this other type of trend. So, getting back to this other type of trend, that's not the best type of trend. You understand? Of course, we understand that. I mean, these people are keeping Torah, Torah mitzvahs. They could be helping people, but the gaiva is something very essential to them. And if you're plaguing in their gaiva, it's like Trump and Elon Musk. Really, they're friends, but since they feel that their honor is being affected, they can't let it go, even though they're friends. It's like a weird thing. You understand? So. There was something that happened, a little trivial thing, just like between Elon Musk and Trump. Elon Musk is so rich. Why does he think he cares about some little amount? He does. You understand? The little bit that he cares about, the EV mandate, that little bit, which it could be other things as well. You understand? But that for sure being one of them, that little bit dishonor, he just couldn't let it go. And now, even though really they could be very good friends, if they just overcame that bit of the arrogance, in this case it would be worth it to overcome that arrogance, but they just can't, because that's their walk, that's the way they do things is with gaiva, is through arrogance. We're not going to get into there's good arrogance, bad arrogance. You understand? And in this case, it seems that there's a lot of good arrogance, but it's a bit of bad arrogance is in there as well. Maybe a little more than they think, and that's causing the bad decision. I'm just giving an example. I'm not speaking about them specifically. You understand? I'm just trying to give an example of what's happening there. I'm not claiming to know exactly what's happening there. I'm just trying to use this as for us to imagine. But in their scenario, it could be different. Now, going back to this Rebbe, so something happened, and now the father of the chassan, just speaks bad about his daughter's father. But the daughter's father, again, it was something that happened. The father of the kala, of the bride, didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. It was someone in his community that did something, which he tried to address, but he did something small. It wasn't really, it had nothing to do even with the other Rebbe. It was just something small, but the father of the chassan, of the groom, just took it out of proportion, and there was just no way to, his arrogance, there was no way to take it back. You understand? So let's call it, father-in-law 1 and father-in-law 2. Father-in-law 1 is of the bride. father-in-law 2 is of the groom. So the father-in-law 1, he knows that divorce is even worse. So basically this father 2 just knocks him out, speaks bad about him. They can't, since they consider him, because something that someone else said that really had nothing to do with anything, now they can't even get together as a family. He's very limited for him to be able to go to his daughter because the husband is with his father, you understand? With father 2. So he can't even go to his daughter. And even for his daughter to call him, she has to do it when the husband's not around. Just to understand what's happening. So he completely gets alienated from his daughter by the husband and father. By the husband and father too. It's sounding like Yibum saying like the Sechtas Yivamis already, but just follow everything we said. If you need to go rewind and then come back, you understand what we're saying. And that's the scenario. Because of this little gaiva that he had inside of him. How could I? He had a whole bunch of chassidim he could have picked from. There was one particularly that was really sweet, really kind. But he could only think. He had this gaiva inside of him. He considered himself to be a rebbe, and he said, "How could my daughter marry a commoner chassid? She has to marry someone that's considered a rebbe, a son of someone that's considered a rebbe." And because of that, now he has nothing. 18, 20 years, and now, for the rest of the life, almost nothing. And only hardship and brokenness. All because of his little gaiva. Again, father 1's gaiva is much less than father 2's. Absolutely. Father 2's, there's something wrong with him. Absolutely. Something mentally wrong with him. Absolutely. He's so arrogant that it's actually a mental disorder. Absolutely. Even though he thinks he's a rebbe and he thinks he's a mashpia and he could say things, whatever. There's something mentally wrong with him. But father 1, what was the cause of all this? The little arrogance that he had inside. Because with father 2 being that type of person, it was bound to happen. It just happened right away, but happened during Sheva Brachas, which is crazy. Imagine during Sheva Brachas you get cut off for your daughter forever, basically. Crazy if you think about it. We have to stop being superficial human beings. Stop looking for the stupid covered, the stupid this, the stupid that. Become a human being. Look for truth, for loyalness, for someone who really wants to do everything he can for his spouse. And you have to want to do whatever you can for your spouse. Each one, a woman has special abilities, a man has special abilities, and they want to maximize their abilities. And they don't put down. A man doesn't put down a woman's abilities, and a woman doesn't put down the man's abilities. Each person has expertise. You respect it. And even if you don't need to know about something, ask about something that's the expertise of your spouse. And even when you don't really have the question, and that just creates love and connection and empathy. I want to bless you all to see the light, to see the true light of God. That we shouldn't live in a false light of God. I love you, and Hashem loves you more.